Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of GOREFEST at Tiffany's here on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, we are on a quest, come hell or high water, to watch everything that the great Tiffany Shepis, Scream Queen extraordinaire, has ever been in, or at least get as close to humanly possible on planet Earth anyone not named Tiffany Shepis has seen. Because I'm sure she's seen all of her stuff, I would imagine. I don't think we could ever usurp her.
I don't know. After this episode, I don't know.
That's true. that is very true, and we'll talk about that more as we go on. My name is Matthew. Joining me on this insane journey that we have embarked upon is my pal Jeff.
Hey, what's up?
Now, Jeff, for that Tiffany Shepis superfan that's out there who's now just clicking on this episode, he's surfing YouTube, he's looking her up, he's like, oh, what is this Gorefest at Tiffany's? At the first episode, he's landing on episode 2. What did he miss in episode 1, and what are we about to wade into with episode 2?
So episode 1 was the first stuff, and it was sort of like there were a couple odds and ends in there, but it was largely defined by Troma.
Yep.
A few Troma feature films in which she may, like Tromeo and Juliet, in which she may have had a small part. Terra Firma, Toxic Avenger 4, in which she had tiny little sort of cameo parts. But then also for me, the big revelation from episode 1 was this television program that I was unaware of before doing this, that she was in, called Troma's Edge TV, where she did kind of a MTV VJ style thing where they tell jokes, although it's very R-rated, the Troma style of humor. But that TV show was hilarious, and that for me was the big takeaway. But episode 1 was largely defined by Troma.
Yep, for sure. And now what I found most interesting, other than sort of revisiting the Troma stuff that she's very well known for, this is all like the kind of stuff she was doing in between that Troma stuff in the early 90s and early 2000s, the non-Troma stuff, potentially the more serious, dramatic roles, comedic roles, things that were not, sort of gross out humor, over the top Troma type stuff. So for any of you out there who are new to the channel here on Outpost Unknown, and you're interested in this Gorefest at Tiffany's that we're going to be going till we're dead, old men, basically we're on a schedule about it once a month. So if you are in, we don't know exactly when these will release every single month because, we watch a bunch of films for them. It's basically, we try to get 5, 6, 7 films at once, do them all kind of like in a block. And we're going through the sort of filmography from the very beginning all the way through. So what do the kids say these days, Jeff? When you watch a outrageous YouTuber and they want to hit like, subscribe, notification, how do they do it? How would you do it if you're going to be like a hip YouTuber nowadays?
I would now what I see a lot of people doing is sort of making this appeal to like they need help. So it's like, hey, it really helps out the channel if you click the notification. And I'm like what are like is it a hostage situation or something? What's the help that you need? But hey, it would really help us out if you would ring that bell.
So it would help us so much, please, so much.
Like we need like the Sarah McLachlan song with the animals from something like that playing to really tug on the heartstrings.
I used to have a huge crush on her in the 90s.
Okay,
huge crush on Sarah McLachlan,
right on,
sure.
Right on.
So we're pretty sure that we saw most of the Troma stuff that is possible to have been seen. There could be weird stuff buried in extras on a random, crazy Troma disc somewhere, but all of the stuff that we thought we could find, we found. Even some stuff that we didn't know existed, we found. The only thing we were kind of unsure on is the Tromaville cafes and whether or not there are more sort of episodes of that she was in. But, if anybody out there watches any of these episodes and is like, hey, you guys actually missed something, and I know where there is a Tiffany Shepis thing, please, it would really help the channel, guys, if you could email us at outpostunknown@gmail.com, and we will put it on the list, we will find it, and we will watch it. If I have to pay for the damn movie, which I did last episode, distractions, I will do it, if that's what it takes, because we want to watch everything. So one interesting thing that I don't know if we necessarily pointed out on the last episode, maybe we did briefly, I had this whole big plan of a Tiffany Shepis death reel, right? She's a Scream Queen. Nothing in the first episode. No deaths in the very first episode. And so I was actually wondering, I was like, will we see her die on screen this episode with all of the random things that she's going to be in? But we do have our first Tiffany Shepis death that we know of on film. There could be another one, but I don't have the exact details yet. But I did want to mention real quick, I want to thank the filmmakers. So trying to find a lot of these films is like impossible. And maybe that could be
Hmm.
something we touch base on this episode in particular,
Yeah.
because this stuff was very difficult to find, and we would not have been able to find it without some help, which I'll mention in just a second. But what I've been doing is trying to get a head start on a lot of these movies. I'll look up the actual film, and I just reaching out to filmmakers, and I'm like, how do I get this movie? How can we find this
Yeah.
movie? I want to give a huge shout out to Stephen Shea of Abysmal Entertainment. He sent Jeff and I this really cool package, Hoodoo for Voodoo. And this is something that Tiffany Shepis was in. And we're talking about Troma here. What's interesting on the back of this, it stars Linnea Quigley, another Scream Queen.
Hmm.
Tiffany Shepis, Lloyd Kaufman, and Debbie Rochon are on this. So this is kind of
Oh wow.
like a Troma mini reunion here,
Yeah.
even though it's not a Troma film. So that's going to be kind of cool. But yeah, Stephen Shea sent us some T-shirts and a whole bunch of cool goodies that we will promote and plug when we get to that episode a little bit later on down the road. But thank you to all the filmmakers out there who have been responding and reaching out to me. And a lot of them aren't on DVD, and they'll send me copies of the films and be like, yeah, we love everybody to a T has said they love Tiffany Shepis, and they're all
Hmm.
on board. They're like, yes, please. We're so happy you're doing this show on Tiffany Shepis because she's amazing. Universal praise. And so thank you to all those filmmakers who are giving us that stuff. The other thing I want to mention is for this, for the whole show in general, for the support is Tiffany Shepis herself. So I've been in contact with her, trying to sort of be like, hey, do you know where we can find any of these? And she provided a bunch of stuff for this episode, because I don't know if we would have been able to find it without her
No,
help.
I don't think so. I mean, I tried.
Yeah, we definitely tried, and there are some that we'll get into some funny stories about whether or not you can even see them anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, huge shout out to Tiffany Shepis for helping provide a lot of the information that we're going to talk about in a lot of the films, because all of this stuff was new to me. I think
Hmm.
I don't think I saw any of them.
For me, 100%.
Maybe the video game commercial, but we'll get there. So with that, let's just start into it. Now, this first film we're going to talk about here is The Shack. Now, I do not have a whole bunch of information about this just yet. This information came across or came to me from Miss Shepis herself, as we were talking about another film that we'll discuss later on down the road in this episode. But she just happened to mention that her first horror film, and this was like her first film in general, first short horror film, was a film called The Shack that was made in the 90s. Now, I don't know if this was pre-Tromeo and Juliet. I've only ever heard that Tromeo and Juliet was her very first thing.
Hmm.
But this seemed to be like, well, no, this was actually my first thing. It was shot on 35 millimeter film in New York. I don't know what the plot is yet. I have this thing where I've been going through, I have a nice big spreadsheet. And as we go through all these things, I have like interview questions. If we're ever lucky enough to get Ms. Shepis on the show, I'm just going to like barrage her with a million different types of questions. And this is one of those films that I would really want to know more about. But you might be wondering, well, this isn't on IMDb. Where can we find it? You can't find it because, as she told me what happened, no known copies of this exist any longer. Because, of course, this was mid 90s, probably 95, 96. And the director had the 35 millimeter print in his basement, and his basement flooded in New York
Hmm.
and destroyed the footage. So, this is, at least right now, that we know of,
It's
the one
a lost film.
a lost Tiffany Shepis film. Now, I don't know if she died on screen in this because, of course, I'm trying to tabulate all these statistics as we go through this. I'm tabulating, like, and you've seen my spreadsheet. It's like, did she die in this? Is it
Yeah.
cameo? Like, it's pretty in depth.
Detailed
Uh,
files.
I have detailed files.
yeah, we're going to be like Tiffany Shepis experts by the time we're finished with this show. So I don't know. Much information on it other than it exists or existed, and it is a thing. And I will try to find more information on that in the future for everybody, because I would just like to know more about that.
Sure.
Little short horror film, pre Tromeo and Juliet, possibly. So there's not much more to say about that one. So we're going to move into the next thing. And what was interesting here is Ms. Shepis sent me a message, and she's like, oh, because we're going to talk about a film called Chick Box and Underground that we could not find anywhere. And she happened
Yeah.
to have a copy of it. And she's like, well, yeah, here you go. Here's Chick Box and Underground. But she also was like, hey, just for your guys' kind of shits and giggles, here's a bunch of commercials I
Yeah.
was in. And I was like, wow, I had no idea Tiffany Shepis was in any commercials. So the first one was National Alliance for the Mentally Ill commercial from 1996. Now, this is a 30-second and a 60-second ad spot. There were two versions. Jeff, what's the basic sort of premise of this commercial?
Well, a woman is on the phone with, I believe, her insurance company. Her son is portrayed as being at the breakfast table. He's pouring himself some Lucky Charms or whatever. And she's talking to the insurance company, and she's frustrated because her son is, I think she goes so far as to say schizophrenic. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's got these serious problems, and she can't get help from her insurance company. They're not covered. They don't cover these mental problems that the son is struggling with. And she's very frustrated. So it's an awareness thing. We want to make people aware that these are issues that people are facing, and they're not getting, at least back in whenever this was, 1996, they're not getting help from the insurance company. I think things maybe have improved a little bit these days, but yeah, at the time seemed to be an issue that needed some attention brought to it.
Yeah, and she's got a very small role in this. She plays like the sister, I believe.
Yeah,
And
she's off to the side, and I think she's kind of portraying that the mom's got a bunch of things going on.
yeah,
Tiffany Shepis as the teenage sister is like, "Mom, can I get a ride to soccer practice or something like that?" And it's just kind of like portraying the stress that the mother is under because she's got these other concerns, but of course, the son struggling with mental illness is a big issue.
Please hold.
See you guys at 6.
All right, Dad, I'll see you later.
Thank you for holding.
Yes, my oldest son has just been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and our doctor says he needs to be hospitalized for a short term, and I had to call for authorization.
One
You drive
moment while I
me
check
today,
the
Mom?
record. I'm sorry, but your insurance plan doesn't cover mental illness.
Why? Our doctor says that schizophrenia is a brain disorder, that treatment works.
I understand that, ma'am, but your plan just doesn't cover it.
Mom, do I have to go to school
But we
today?
have the best policy the company offers. My son is really sick. How can I not be covered?
There's nothing I can do.
Can we go now?
This year, hundreds of thousands of American families will discover they have no insurance coverage for brain disorders, such as schizophrenia and manic depression. For a free consumer guide to help you understand your insurance plan, call the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill at 1-800-950-6264.
yeah. And I think this is actually, perhaps there were commercials like this on, in the 90s because we were high school or teenagers in
Yeah.
the 90s. This
Mhm.
stuff might have been on. I don't really remember a lot of commercials about this kind of stuff. I remember
I definitely remember like don't drink and drive, hey kids,
Yeah.
don't do drugs, stuff like that. But yeah,
I remember the
not
egg,
exactly.
right? Like, is your brain on drugs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But I don't remember, like, specifically my kid's schizophrenic and the insurance
Yeah.
company won't cover it.
Yeah.
Now we know, obviously, there's a big healthcare problem in the United States of America.
Mhm.
So
For sure.
I actually do think that this commercial is kind of like it still works to this day because I
Oh
think
yeah.
there are a lot of people who
Oh
would be
yeah.
like, I can't get help for my child and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Absolutely.
so yeah, it's a cool little spot. I don't know if the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill is still an organization and they're still doing stuff. But that was kind of cool. I'll play the commercial either here or some clips of it so you guys can kind of see
Mhm.
that. But I think she has like one line. She's like, "Hey, mom,
Yeah.
you taking me to school?" or something like that. But that was kind of cool. So the next one, okay, this was wild. So this was
Might be my favorite thing.
Oh, it was crazy. So this was the Trivu Entertainment Spotlight on Fashion Wonder Bra commercial from 1996. And I actually went to this website. I looked this up. I'm like, is this still a
Uh-huh.
thing? This commercial is on their website. You can literally click it and go watch it right now. And all these other different commercials that this company sort of put together for these various things. It was made for the Sara Lee Foundation, and I'll let you walk us through this Wonder Bra commercial.
Well,
What
you
is
got to
this?
watch it.
Yeah.
Whether the link's in the description or whatnot.
I'll link it
if
for
it's,
sure.
Yeah, you got to watch it because it plays like a weird absurdist Adult Swim humor sketch or something kind of. It's like
Yeah.
this man talking about how like women will feel more confident and they'll feel sexier if they get a hold of this product that he's selling, and he talks about like the engineering feat that is the Wonder Bra. It's it's proportionally like a suspension bridge. This might as well be the Golden Gate Bridge with
It's like
the
52 points of like physics stuff.
the physics that this has to support.
It's been no easy engineering feat creating one of these things. We've run into engineering problems never seen in designing aircraft or bridges. You see, the bra has to support structures many, many times its weight, and yet not compress its contents, all the while being as luxurious as a second skin. It must withstand natural elements far more severe than monsoons and desert heat. It's got to survive washing machines and dryers. A Wonder Bra consists of 54 moving parts, giving maximum uplift vectors to virtually constantly moving structures. Of course, all the while maintaining maximum cleavage. If you can accomplish all this in a device and then say, "Here, wear this for 16 hours," and want to put it back on the next day, well, you've just fashioned a favorite piece of your wardrobe.
And then you have some just attractive women, one of which is Tiffany Shepis, just coming and going through the screens like she's in like a high-powered business suit, like she's doing some real high-powered corporate boardroom stuff. But
I don't think she speaks. There's a
not in
voiceover.
this one, I don't think.
There's a voiceover at one point that kind of sounds like her. I wasn't 100%, but she's not on screen. It's just like a voiceover of some other woman. I'll play it.
I've been involved in beauty pageants, and that's like the big thing. You either get surgery or you pad. So the Wonder Bra has been a very important part of my life.
Maybe the listener or the viewers out there can determine, is this actually Tiffany Shepis? But I don't.
And then I think if I recall, there's some like fashion model runway stuff. Like it's just it's a weird little package, and it's just so odd. It's very different from what I would expect to see out of a bra commercial today. And I don't know I don't know when the last time I saw a bra commercial was, for that matter, but it's just very strange, very like surreal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it even uses, I think it opens with the Terminator theme music. It's like dun dun dun.
Yeah.
Dun 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 dun. And not they have.
Or they another thing. If I'm thinking of the right thing, they use some licensed music, which I know is a big deal. I don't know if they like.
Michael Jackson, Madonna.
Yeah, that's what it was. I assume they appropriately license this stuff, especially if you can go watch it on their website to this day. But I wouldn't associate this type of video with getting a hold of that type of stuff. Maybe it was easier to license music back then. I don't know.
I can't imagine Michael Jackson allowed them to use his music.
And
why would you use like the Terminator theme song to open it? Like what? It's weird. It's weird. I will definitely link in the description. I'll play a piece of it here during it. It's so bizarre. Now, Ms. Shepis actually mentioned she has literally no memory of ever filming this. She has no idea how she ended up in this thing or why she ended up in this thing. But 1996, so she would have been 16-ish or 17, something like that. So, I guess that's another thing to add to the potential list of questions. Like, how would you have ever found yourself in this weird situation to be in this Wonder Bra commercial, this bizarre Wonder Bra commercial? So, there's that. Not a whole lot to say about it. She's not in it a whole lot. Just a few.
I mean,
shots.
it's a short thing.
Yeah. So now we're going to move into 1998, Shampoo Horns, directed by Manuel Toledano. So this is like the first feature film that we see Tiffany Shepis in at this time that is not Troma related. So I think this is literally the first thing you can watch that she was in that was not Troma. So what is, just again, for anyone new watching this, we're not going to go through the plot points of all of these movies, ad nauseum. We're going to give you a broad overview of what these things are kind of about. We kind of want to focus on Tiffany Shepis for these things rather than the feature films. This is on YouTube. I'll link it in the description below as well, so you can go watch this. But Jeff, what is kind of like the high level synopsis of Shampoo Horns?
So it's New York City, right? Is where this is supposed to be, and then so it's like late 90s. I of course wasn't around the dance club scene in the late 90s, being from the Midwest as I was. We just didn't have that type of stuff, but it was a big deal. It was a whole scene, a whole community of people. This part has a particular focus on like drag queens and I think you would say queer culture and whatnot. And so there's all these people who gather at this dance club, and they're putting on their shows. And it's, I don't know, it's one of these slice of life things where each person has their own little story. They kind of converge at this dance club. And so you follow the one character, and they're deciding whether they want to leave town to go strike out on their own, or Tiffany Shepis and her little friend are like, they're young people, and they're kind of maybe doing the drugs more than they can handle, and they're getting themselves into trouble.
You know, the stuff is supposed to affect you a lot more when you dissolve them.
Well, aren't you taking too much of that stuff?
I've seen people do 10 hits in one night.
So it's all these different characters kind of converging and centering around this dance club where the nightlife is firing on all cylinders all the time.
Yeah. And I think even in the late 80s and 90s, Club Kids was like a big thing up in New York, and they were in tabloids and sort of like the socialites of that kind of time period. I know Michael Alec is one of the actual actors in this. He very notoriously murdered one of his friends and chopped up the body and tried to hide it and stuff in a drug-induced stupor. And I think like Party Monster, I think that movie with Macaulay Culkin is about that. Yep. There's been a number of movies about that particular stuff. So Tiffany plays a character named Amy. My favorite line here is, "Whatever you do, don't do K."
Just remember, whatever you do, don't do K.
Whatever you do, don't do K. I guess her and her friend are basically just, they're taking a bunch of ecstasy, right? I am not a drug aficionado, so
I don't know.
Because I was like watching and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is ecstasy that they're taking. If I'm wrong, leave a comment because I'm not a drug aficionado. But I'm pretty sure they take a whole bunch of ecstasy. That's why she's like, don't take K, and she gets completely wasted. Like, they go to the club. She starts getting sick at the club. The friend brings her back, sort of puts her in bed. And then she just kind of like wakes up in a drug-induced haze and wanders the streets of New York in the cold, basically just like in a nightgown. And until, and her friend is very panicked. He's looking for her. He wakes up and he goes back to the club trying to find her and stuff like that. And you just kind of, like you said, it's kind of like a slice of life. It's an ensemble. There's a bunch of different stories going on. So she kind of comes in and out of this story of all these different characters. And then what happens, Jeff, as she's wandering the streets of New York?
Well, there's a few little vignettes where she encounters some people and maybe they catcall at her, or she staggers in front of a shop where some guy tries to kind of help her out maybe. But then she inevitably wanders into traffic, gets squanched.
She took those pills. And I told her it was too much.
She's running. She's running.
What else do you see?
She's running. She's running. She's running. She's running.
Hi, this is Amy.
And this is Tony.
We can't come to the phone right now, but if you leave your name and number, we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Bye.
Hi, Amy. It's Mom. It's 11:25. I know you and Tony went out, but I wanted to remind you that your father's coming to pick you guys up for dinner tomorrow.
Boom. Dead. First time Tiffany Shepis has died on film that we know of, or that we can actually see. So this officially will go on the death reel of the first one. So what do you think of her performance sort of in this?
I think it's fine. I think she reads the lines like anybody would need to get it across in this movie. I don't know that there's a lot for anyone to do necessarily in this movie, but as long as you're kind of, because I don't know, the people in the movie they're not necessarily acting. It doesn't feel like, it seems like one of those movies where you gather just people who are these people and then you portray them almost documentary style. Yeah. So it's less about reading the script than just sort of observing them be themselves. And she might even be sort of a fish out of water in that she is an actress, whereas a lot of these other people seem to be more just kind of portraying themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. I thought this was an interesting watch. I wouldn't necessarily say like I love the film or anything like that, but like our friend Rachel, I think she would actually find some interest watching this.
Yeah, I was wondering if this might be something of a a movie whose time has come now. Maybe it would resonate more with a certain audience now, and
Yeah.
it might be just an overlooked or hidden gem for a certain audience.
Yeah, for sure. And again, this is available on YouTube. I'll link it down below. It's got some interesting things to say. I think like one of the main characters, he finds out he has HIV and he sort of passes away in the movie and stuff. So there's a bunch of interesting things that they're trying to discuss, which I think is worthwhile. I don't know if they pulled the film off as well as it could have.
It's kind of amateurish, But
yeah.
I googled the film and the filmmaker, and there's like an interview or something where the guy talks about like how he got financed, because I think the filmmaker is from Spain but was living in New York, attending college or something, and the way they got everything financed is kind of interesting.
Yeah, and she was obviously a working actor in New York, right? She's doing Troma at this time, so I'm sure she was heard about this and was like, yeah, I'll try out for it. And I think that the one thing about a lot of these sort of early things, even with the Troma and even a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about now, is what I think is cool about it is, she has that sort of like it factor, I think.
Absolutely.
So when when it's like a small role, like this was a very small role. She's not in it. I mean, maybe 10 minutes total of screen time, if that. But it's like, she has that charisma. She's got that watchability factor. You're like, oh yeah, that's just cool. Like, I like watching this person. Whereas I could look at other actors potentially in this film, like, yeah, I don't really want to follow this person along. Yeah. So I do think that is kind of cool, and that kind of comes out in a lot of these early films. So that's Shampoo Horns. Very small role, but it is interesting. Don't do K, kids.
Just remember, whatever you do, don't do K.
We do not condone that on Outpost Unknown. Whatever you do, don't do K. So now we're going to get into possibly one of the most interesting films that we're going to talk about tonight, Chick Boxin' Underground from 1999, directed by Michael D. Fox of Independent Edge Cinema. Now, I know, Jeff, when we had sort of were mapping out the groupings of the films that we were going to do, and we saw Chick Boxin'. Now, you specifically like Chick Boxin' Underground, like you were interested in this. Okay. Why?
Yeah. Well, it just sounds great. Like I love fighting, like Bloodsport, these movies where it's set against like a martial arts tournament and stuff. I love that kind of stuff. And so if we're going to have one that's like goofy, pretty girls doing it, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm in.
Okay. So what's Chick Boxin' Underground all about?
Well, it's not about much. It's kind of what this feels like to me is, now I'm not to say that I didn't find it entertaining, but it's more like a comedy skit. Like think of a sketch comedy show. Yeah. It's like a sketch out of a sketch comedy show, but they stretch it out for a feature length.
8 extraordinarily beautiful women, each with a big bone to pick and built like a brick defecatory dwelling, will be facing each other tonight in the Ring of Destiny to decide who will become this year's Chick Boxing Underground World Champion. Hi, Tim Wanahump here.
It's just, you have a bunch of goofy characters who are these fighters, and they're going to get in like a underground fight club and fight each other.
From Moose Jaw, Kentucky, Sally Ray Harper. Born in a shack and a holler, this little country girl was raised on a steady diet of pork and Pepsi.
And they kind of set it up like, tournament style. So if you beat this person, then you go on to the next round, and they have some goofy announcers and all kinds of things. It's a comedy. It's funny, but it's just these chicks boxing underground.
Yep. And she plays the character of Xerxes.
Xerxes, folks are saying that your next match against Sally Ray is going to be a real barn burner.
It's going to be great because I'm going to win. I'm going to pierce her ass and tattoo her brain and leave her out to dry like burnt milk.
Leave her out to dry like burnt milk.
Do you want to keep that penis going?
Yes, burnt milk, that tried and true metaphor.
And of course, I guess Xerxes' character trait is she's high out of her mind. She's on steroids.
She did the K probably.
Just remember, whatever you do, don't do K.
Yes. Xerxes is on the K.
My old man and I, we get stoned on Sunday mornings and we watch The Stooges. Those guys crack me up. Hey, did you ever see the one in the courtroom where Curly has to dance?
For sure. But like steroids, cocaine. There's this hilarious moment where I actually laughed out loud when she's fighting this one character. She just pulls out the huge bag of cocaine and like snorts it during the fight. I was like, this is funny.
No, she's shoving it up her own nose.
This feels like the most Troma, like this is Troma adjacent, right? You would consider this like Troma adjacent for sure. Like for example, the announcers are constantly making jokes. One of the announcers is a female. She's just topless of the whole thing. And the other announcers are like staring at her breasts and things of that nature.
Hey, dude, work on that broadcast. It's broadcasting technique. Breathe in. Now let go. Yeah, look that way, Tina, would you?
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
Let go. Breathe in. Yeah, let go. Breathe in. Let go. Yes, breathe. Oh, thank you, Rad. Tex.
This was Edge TV Tiffany Shepis. It felt like she took some of like the Edge TV type stuff that she would do in like Wild and Crazy and translated it into this role. Is that kind of how you felt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this could have had a Troma label on it.
Yeah, for sure. So unfortunately, I don't really know how people can see this. Of course, Ms. Shepis provided us with a copy. I don't know where you can find the full thing. I'll put a few clips here and there. But, just out of interest, I made some sort of notes here. She beats Sally Ray Harper by biting her throat during her first fight. So Sally Ray Harper is kind of like this Midwest I don't know, would you call it like she's got the short shorts.
Farmer's daughter.
Farmer's daughter. She beats her by biting her throat. She loses to Monica Kane, who is like the karate, right? She's like the Karate Kid type character. After getting distracted by a guy drinking a can of Surge, which I appreciated because I used to drink Surge in the 90s, and it was just like, Surge. It was so funny. At the 52-minute mark, I wrote she pulls out the bag of cocaine and snorts it. However, she does lose. So Monica Kane beats her. Now, I was like, does she die in this? Or are these people dying? Because it wasn't clear to me as I was watching whether they died. Because she bites Sally Ray Harper in the throat. And I was like, did she kill her? But nope, they do not. So she shows up at the very end when they're giving like the grand prize out, and everybody has kind of like a battle royale. They're all fighting over the prize, and then Sally Ray gets her revenge, punches her in the stomach, and kind of knocks her out, I guess. So she's, again, there's a lot of characters in this, so she's not in it a whole lot, but I did appreciate the fact that she was so over the top and ridiculous with it. And I like when you had like the dude who was like interviewing her or whatever, and she would like stare off into space. Like she would go from super pissed off and like roid rage sort of thing to just like lost.
Just remember, whatever you do, don't do K.
Now, in your next match, you're going to be facing up against Monica Kane. Do you have any comments about that match?
No.
Any comments at all?
Not really.
Do you think you're going to win?
I guess so.
I don't know. I thought her character was cool. I thought her character was the best of all the fighters.
Sure.
Did you have anybody else in there that you were like, thought was as cool?
I liked Sally Ray. But yeah.
So Chick Boxing Underground, 1999. I don't know how you guys can find it, but it's an entertaining watch. Tiffany Shepis is pretty cool at it. So now we're gonna get into some interesting ones here. Some Fish Can Fly, 1999, directed by Robert Kane Pappas. So she is actually credited as a partier in this. So I don't know if she just shows up. I don't know if she has any lines. I don't know if she just showed up for a few seconds, because spoiler alert, we were unable to see this movie. So we cannot cross this one off the list. So we've crossed off all the other ones other than Shaq. We can't cross off this. And this is kind of an interesting story because I went out of my way to reach out to the director. Could not get a hold of the director. So I'm looking at the IMDb page for this, and if you go to IMDb, it's got the movie poster and everything. So somebody at some point was like, oh yeah, we're going to upload the poster to this so people can see it. Nowhere streaming. Could not find it anywhere. I've looked at the IMDb page, found a number of producers that were on it. So I'm like, well, I'm going to contact these producers and I'm going to see, yo, what's going on? How do I get a copy of this movie? So I contacted one of the producers, and the producer reached out to me on Facebook, actually. And she goes, well, hey, let me look into it. When are you guys recording the episode? I'm like, oh, it won't be till probably after Thanksgiving. So you got plenty of time. This is early November. And she's like, okay, well, give me some time. I'll look into it and I'll get you a copy. And I was like, awesome. Because Tiffany Shepis herself had told me this is lost forever, I think. I don't have a copy of it. I don't think there's any way to see it. But I was bound and determined. I'm like, I gotta find this for Ms. Shepis. I must. So I'm waiting patiently for the producer to get back to me. Producer finally gets back to me. And she goes, well, we don't have anything. We have no version of this movie other than a 35 millimeter print that is in storage. They never made any DVDs of it. They never put it on streaming. She said that it aired briefly on the IFC channel back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it did screen. So there, for all I know, there's a Tiffany Shepis super fan with a VHS copy sitting in a trunk or something of this movie. And if you have this movie, please reach out to us, outpostunknown@gmail.com. We'd love to see it. But according to the producer I talked to, she said it's, quote, pathetic that nobody can see this film, because she had no idea that this was unavailable for anybody to view.
Okay.
So
that producer with whom you spoke anyway probably feels that this is a worthwhile film.
Yeah, it seemed that way. I mean, again,
because like something, I'm not to say that any of these are bad, but like something like the Wonder Bra commercial, someone could say like, yeah, you can't see it, but who cares? It's not that big of a deal. Yeah. But this is a legitimate film that this producer anyway seems to feel like, oh, that sucks. You can't see this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it kind of gets back to that sort of thing you were mentioning, circling back around to at the beginning of this episode, where we were curious about, or you in particular, that some of these films have just disappeared, right?
Yeah.
And you have these kind of pieces of art that literally existed briefly and are unavailable. I know you had you were thinking and batting that around in your mind. Did you have any sort of like comments that you wanted to mention about how weird that is?
Yeah, I just find the lost media aspect really fascinating and interesting, and I suppose it could happen even today. But we're here where these films were made at a time where not everything was digital right off the bat, not everything was immediately uploaded to YouTube or something like that. And of course, YouTube could go away at some point. Those are they exist on a server somewhere, and that server could go away. But these things, like they're so I don't know, like temporal. It's just sitting on a thing somewhere, and if that thing isn't preserved or it isn't copied or distributed, it just disappears. And I find that really interesting. There's some sort of, I don't know, like magic in those things that are just sitting there, and if they're not maintained, they'll disappear. And it's like, did it even exist? Someone knew it existed because someone wrote the IMDb entry for Some Fish Can Fly and put all that in. Someone knows that it exists, but did it really? I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we're kind of dealing with this now with, like HBO Max and Disney Plus removing content from their streaming services. It's like, oh, I'm going to go watch the new Willow TV show came out last year. Nope, Disney's axed it. Or we're getting rid of like this completed piece of art for tax reasons. We want a tax write-off. It'll never be released ever again. And I do think it's a problem. I mean, my personal opinion is like, everything should be preserved somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, all of even my crappy film I made in high school, A Ripper Runs Through It, which you can view right here on Outpost Unknown if you are so inclined. Terrible movie, but I want it up there. I don't want it to just be sitting on a hard drive, and then in 10 years that hard drive dies and it's gone. Like all that stuff that we did and all those memories that we had are they're just going to fade away. And then at a certain point in time, all the people involved in Some Fish Can Fly will no longer be around. And it will be a point in time when nobody will have ever been able to see this movie. And it could be great. I don't know. I don't know. So hopefully, someone out there has Some Fish Can Fly. According to the producer, it is on a 35 millimeter print in a, storage locker somewhere. I doubt we can get that. I mean, maybe I can convince them to send it to me and we can screen it at our local cinema or something like that. Wouldn't that be something?
That would be hilarious.
Wouldn't that be?
That would be awesome.
We would fly Tiffany Shepis out on her own dime.
Oh, yeah.
Come on out. I got the theater rented and everything. We will screen this movie. So, yeah, unfortunately, we cannot cross Some Fish Can Fly off the list at this point in time. Now, the next film is from 2000. It's called Everything for a Reason. It was directed by Vlas Paralipanides. I apologize if I butchered that name. I believe he's Greek. And the interesting thing about this individual is him and his brother, they have gone on to some fame. So they actually wrote the Tarsem Singh Immortals movie from 2011, had Henry Cavill in it. They wrote that movie, and I hate anime, so I haven't seen this, but it pains me because I love ancient Greek mythology. There's a show on Netflix called Blood of Zeus. That's an anime. Are you aware of this, Jeff?
I've heard of that for sure, but I haven't watched it.
Apparently, they're the creators of that. So
I can see the Netflix thumbnail in my head.
Yeah. So I've never seen that, but apparently they have gone on to some acclaim doing stuff. And I don't know if this was their very first film, but this one's kind of interesting. She was credited as Tiffany J. Shepis on this. So one of my questions will be like, is that, you're going more sort of like mature actors? Because a lot of those actors, they will change their name like, oh, well, I'm no longer, see, off the top of my head, I can't think of somebody. I'm no longer Larry Fishburne. I'm Lawrence Fishburne.
Right.
That kind of thing. I'm out of Elm Street days as Larry. Now I'm Lawrence, for example. I don't know if that was the case here, but she goes as Tiffany J. Shepis, and she plays a character named Joanne, who is the sister of the lead actress. So Everything for a Reason. What's this one basically about?
It's like one of these Gen X indie relationship movies, I guess, right? I mean, a bunch of young people who are more or less hip, depending on how you view it, I guess, and they're just navigating their relationships and
like I guess there's the sister of Tiffany Shepis is kind of like I would say the main actor here. Again, this is another ensemble, but she's kind of like the main actress here, and she's a virgin. That's like the big, the comedic elements of the movie is like she's a virgin, and this guy that kind of starts dating her, him and his friends are like, well, how do I deal with a virgin? They're very crass about, there's a line in there. It's like, well, the one thing you don't need about with a virgin, you don't need to worry about size. Like, you don't need to worry about that it's that kind of humor. And then, it's essentially about their relationship. He's a writer, and he there's a moment where he realizes, oh, I've kind of accomplished my dream. I have the opportunity to go out to California and write for, I don't know if it was movies or a TV show or something. And he kind of like thinks that she's holding him back, and he's like, I don't need you anymore. And the relationship breaks down. And then of course there's a happy ending at the very end. They sort of get together and whatnot. But Tiffany Shepis, she plays the sister. Again, not a whole lot of screen time in this. But I don't know. What did you think of her role in this?
I thought she was fine. I mean, she's obviously very attractive, so like it draws your eye in this movie. So you're like, oh yeah, this is the reason I would keep watching this movie through to the end, is just to see more of her.
Fair.
Like, I'm not really interested. Oh, I will say the one thing about this movie, completely unrelated to Tiffany, is that this movie, strangely enough, had the most sick me out moment, because this dude is talking about fooling around with his girlfriend, and they even have a little flashback scene or something, and he's like, yeah, I had my finger in her mouth, and then I accidentally scratched the roof of her mouth, and that just makes me wince and ugh.
Well, we somehow managed to get back into it, and I got all worked up, and I accidentally pricked the roof of her mouth with my fingernail.
Ow!
Shudder. I don't want to think about someone's fingernail scratching the roof of your mouth.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. This movie, I would say, like, I guess her character was a little different than I thought. I mean, she's the younger sister, but there's a moment where she's talking about like the older sister is like, well, what is the thing that most women remember after 5 years of dating a guy? Like, what's the thing? And it's like, oh, the penis size, right?
And guess what they claimed you would most likely remember about an ex? We're talking like 4 years, 5 years down the line.
The size of his penis.
Yeah, how did you know that?
It's obvious.
And like her sister's like, well, take it from me. I'm the younger, more experienced sister. You're the virgin. That's what you could remember of all these guys that you sort of date. I had actually thought that her character arc would be a little bit more anti the dude who was kind of like breaking her
Okay.
sister's heart a little bit.
Sure.
And because I was like, oh, the little sister's going to stick up, and you're going to get that scene where she's like railing on the guy and shouting him down, get away from my sister. You don't really
Yeah.
get that. You don't really get that in this. She's just kind of there for like emotional support for her sister. And there's a moment towards the end when the guy shows up at their house and she answers the door. And I was like, give me a shout, or like,
Yeah.
because I mean, if it was me, I'd fucking go off on this dude, and you don't really get
Right.
that. I was kind of disappointed in that aspect of it, but yeah, I think she's fine. She doesn't do a whole lot in this other than just kind of be emotional support.
Yeah, I guess the script, if it was one of these people's first films, it's probably maybe they're not at the top of their game. They don't know how to make a really great script, and also they might be portraying sort of like their own. I don't know if the script is an insert for the writers exactly, but they're portraying their own point of view on things. So like they might not feel like they want to be stuck up to by they don't want the woman. You know what I mean? It might be like
that's true. I mean,
it's from
fair.
their point of view.
Quite possibly, yeah. So, but yeah, I think that personally, this just wasn't my type of movie.
No, not at all.
Wasn't something I was super into, but it was interesting to see her in a role that wasn't like she wasn't hopped up on drugs. She wasn't being over the top like in a trauma sort of way. Because I'm looking back, this is the first one that she's really kind of just like, I guess, a normal person, if that makes any sense, where she's not playing like, well, not for like an exploitation angle, but someone who is on drugs or somebody who is wearing revealing clothing all the time. This is just kind of like a straight part, and maybe like her first kind of straight, I'm just playing this little sister for sport. So it was interesting to watch it for that aspect, but in terms of the film, it just wasn't for me. And this is another one where I don't think you can get it. I don't think it's available. There are a few clips on YouTube that if you search for this, there's a few different clips, but Everything for a Reason. I'll throw in a few clips interspersed here of Miss Shepis in this, but so that's that. And now we're into the final two things here. This one, the Conker's Bad Fur Day commercial from 2001.
Yeah, so out partying last night. He gets up on the bar and starts spraying all over these bikers. Then we get back here and he goes all night. He's paying for it now.
See this squirrel go on a bender, and you'll never look at squirrels the same way again. Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Oh yeah, you like that?
Rated M for mature.
You want some more? I'll give you some more, baby. Oh yeah.
So, Jeff, did you ever play this game? Do you remember what this game was?
I had Conker's Bad Fur Day for my Nintendo 64. Yeah.
Okay, so
it might still be sitting in a closet somewhere. As a matter of fact, I don't know.
Okay, I never played this. So what is like the hook? I know it was like the first mature rated Nintendo game, right?
It was developed by, I think it was made by Rare, which is the company that made like Banjo-Kazooie and some other things. So it was just what Super Mario 64 is like.
Sure.
So it's a game like that. You're just running around your little polygon character and jumping and collecting baubles and coins and whatnot. But you run into a character who's made out of poop and he makes a bunch of fart jokes and stuff like that. So I think it was rated M for mature.
Yeah.
And at the time, so like this is like the late 90s or no, this is the early 2000s. So at the time, like there was this whole like, kids walking around in their Jinkos and being edgy and, no, mom, I'm not going to clean my room. That kind of just snotty attitude.
Yeah.
And it was just trading on that. But like, hey, kid, they sold so many copies of this just because a kid was like, I'm going to plug in my Nintendo game and it's going to say a dirty word. And it was a recipe for success. How good the game was, I don't really even remember, but I think it was a legitimate game because it was a good developer. There's a well liked developer. but then you just sell kids some dirty stuff, and that's what they want.
Yeah. And I remember, I never played this game, but I do kind of remember vaguely that, I don't know if this was the very first mature rated Nintendo game, but that's a big thing for Nintendo, because Nintendo
it
would
was at the time.
always stay away from that kind of stuff. I know it was a big deal when Nintendo got the rights to Resident Evil, when that, and then they put out a mature Resident Evil game on there on the GameCube, and you're like, whoa.
And back then, they were like taking the blood out of Mortal Kombat on Nintendo, right? You had to buy it on Sega if you wanted blood. Yeah.
So they started to open the door to a little bit more mature content. So I never played this game, but why don't you describe the commercial? What's the commercial like?
It's hard to even. I had to watch it a couple times to even notice that it was her. You don't get a good shot of her face, I don't think, personally, but she's just laying on a bed talking about the wild night she had with Conquer the Squirrel. Yeah, he kept me up all night. He just couldn't stop. And it just kind of laying in a flop house, but describing this wild tryst she had with a cartoon squirrel.
Yeah. I think there's like the very end when it's like, by Conker's Bad Fur Day, and it's just like, it sounds like they're having like vigorous sex, and then it just cuts to the squirrel and she's like scratching his belly or something like that.
Yeah.
Definitely
it's funny.
It is, and I remembered seeing that. Like, after I watched this, I'm like, I do remember seeing this commercial. Like, for whatever reason, I had no idea it was Tiffany Shepis in this commercial until I, watched this. But I do vaguely remember, maybe it was on MTV late night or something. I remember seeing this commercial because I remember like the, not necessarily like what happens, but I remember like the dirty hotel room and just like the weird vibe that this thing gives off. And I'm sure I would, if I would have had a Nintendo 64, I'd be like, I'm buying that game. Unfortunately, I did not have a Nintendo 64, so Conker's Bad Fur Day wasn't available to me. But you can see this commercial. It is on YouTube, so I'll link that in the description below. I'll probably just play it, so you can watch it. It's only 30 seconds long, but that was kind of interesting. So the last film we're going to talk about tonight on episode 2 is a film called Conte, directed by Sanjay Gupta, which is a Bollywood film. Now, in my sort of research on Tiffany Shepis, I watched as many sort of interviews on YouTube as I possibly could. And for those of you who don't know much about my backstory, I used to be an actual professional interviewer for like a decade, calling people on the phones, doing like political surveys and surveys for corporations and things like that, just talking to tons and tons of people. And so whenever I'm watching like interviews, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but I'm just like, dive into this question a little bit more, right? This person said this, like, follow that trail and see where it goes. So many of these interviews I've seen on YouTube with Ms. Shepis are just like, what's it like to be a scream queen? And what was it like to work for Troma? And, I'm just kind of like, come on. Like, I want to know, like, deep down, like what happened on set. Like, you mentioned what? Well, let's talk about what happened on set, for example. So I was watching one of these interviews, and she happened to bring up, and I tried to reach out to the YouTuber, but there's no contact information because I want to kind of like pull a clip from this interview and put it on there. I don't know. Do you think we'll get in trouble if I pull the clip and gave him credit and let her tell this story?
I see people do that all the time, and then you just put down in the bottom, you say like clip by so and so, and you put their little handle. And I see that all the time.
I might put a little clip because I do think that I want to give these individuals some traffic to go watch the interview, because it is a pretty good interview, all things considered. But she mentions this at the very end of the interview. She mentions this story of Conte.
For years, people would bring me to conventions this movie called Kante, Kaante. And the covers were always different. And I was like, I'm not in that. And they're like, well, it says you were on IMDb and I bought all your movies. Like, you have some of those awesome fans who are great and they'll bring you every movie you've ever made to sign. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not in it. And you just paid $10, my bad, but I'm not in it. Years and years and years this would happen. I finally go on IMDb and I'm like, hey, IMDb, sir, I'm not in this movie. Could you please remove my name? No problem. They remove it. Couple months later, a buddy of mine, Rob G, texted me and was like, I'm at the New Beverly watching this crazy Bollywood version of Reservoir Dogs, and there I see my favorite scream queen, Tiffany Shepis. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, it's called Conte. I'm like,
You were in it?
I'm like, dude, I'm not in that. I was like, I don't know. Maybe the person looks like me. He's like, you're 100% in this. So so it was still playing at the New Beverly. So I take my daughter. I'm like, we're gonna go see if I'm in this film. We got there. It is the Bollywood version of Reservoir Dogs. And it's got this huge Bollywood cast, like very, very, very famous Bollywood people. And sure enough, a little cameo of me on the arm of some bad guy is me.
It was you.
It was me. How many drinks do you have to have in your lifetime, and how many movies do you have to be in to forget you're in a Bollywood film?
What gangster wouldn't want to have Tiffany Shepis on his arm? And that's it. She was like shocked. She could not believe that she was actually in this movie. Again, no recollection of how she ended up in this movie, how she ended up in this Bollywood production. And that's another thing I think is fascinating as, somebody of her caliber. And, it's not just Tiffany Shepis. You could probably say this to Danielle Harris or Debbie Rochon or Linnea Quigley, going back further. All these scream queens who have been in over 100 movies, right? Little bit parts. To me, like for all the movies I've ever made, I remember stuff about every single one of them. There's not a single movie, even going back to 1999, that I'm like, I did that? I don't remember doing that. So I do find it kind of weird and intriguing a little ways, like actors who are in this stuff and they just completely forget the entire experience that they were in.
I was thinking a little bit about this myself, and I was thinking this is these people's vocation. This is their job. So they go to work, so to speak, and do this stuff. And I'm trying to think like, in my job, I've had projects where I did it and it was such a blur and I don't really remember what I did. I think of movies as being so much more significant or memorable than, whatever spreadsheet type of job I'm doing. So it seems strange to me that someone would not even remember doing something like that. But I guess if you think about it in terms of, well, it's just their job. It's another day at the office. And maybe that one wasn't that memorable. I could see it happening, I guess.
She probably had an agent or something that said, hey, you're going to get a couple $100, show up and sit in this booth. It was probably, I don't know, 20 minutes filmed actually shooting, and then boom, she's off to the next thing. So yeah, that now you kind of couch it in those terms. That makes a little bit more sense. Just weird from like a filmmaker's perspective, I guess, because you're so much more involved in it. But So Conte, ladies and gentlemen, it is available on YouTube. It's 2.5 hours long. I gotta say, I only watched it till Tiffany Shepis showed up. The reason why is because it's not subtitled. I had no idea what they were saying. So
that's awesome.
So I don't know, but I will link it in the description. If any of you are interested, it's around the 32-minute mark, and you can see Miss Shepis on the arm of a Bollywood gangster. So there is that. So now we're reaching the wrap-up portion of the show. Again, I think this was kind of fun. Jeff, give me your thoughts on sort of, we've watched pretty much everything we could of her non-Troma early stuff. Your thoughts after watching the non-Troma content?
So I think I think the lost media aspect of it is super fascinating to me. I just think that's something that I'm always interested in turning over in my mind. And then B, we think of her looking back now, over the whole filmography. She's become known as like a scream queen or a horror movie actor. And then your genre nerds and fans, like, I used to be big into it. I'm less so now, but still, your horror fans, they'll kind of maybe feel possessive of these performers or their favorite actors and actresses. Yep. And maybe sometimes something like Everything for a Reason or Shampoo Horns would come along and you'd be like, not resentful but you'd be like, why are you wasting my time with this? I don't want to see this. Go, bring on the next slasher movie where we see a bunch of blood and guts. But I think that if you really are a fan of an actor, you should want them to be able to be in a bunch of different things, pursue things that they find interesting, and maybe even, support them, maybe even take a look at something like Everything for a Reason or Shampoo Horns, even if it's not probably to your taste. And maybe you can tell that just from looking at the movie poster for Everything for a Reason. You're like, well, this isn't a slasher film. Why am I going to watch this? But, if you really love the performer, maybe support them and take a look at their other stuff.
Oh, I think that's really well said. And, I think you can even direct that from a genre fan, right?
Mhm.
Perspective. There are plenty of actors. I'll say it from the director's point of view because I'm a film director. That's what I love to do. So I always look at everything from the director's perspective. But look at something like Sam Raimi, right?
Mhm.
I grew up, watching the Evil Dead movies in the '80s and the '90s and stuff, and then Sam Raimi he did A Simple Plan, which
Mhm.
is a film that I absolutely love, but it's nothing like, the Evil Dead movies, or he did like For Love of the Game and stuff, the baseball movie and stuff. And, I would never be like, oh, I love Sam Raimi, but I'm not going to support him because he made a
Yeah.
baseball movie. I feel like genre fans, by and large, we want to see these individuals that we adore succeed. Like I love when somebody, if Tiffany Shepis got cast in like the next Hollywood blockbuster, an MCU role or something, of course we're going to go out there and
Yeah.
support her for that because that's just awesome. It's like you invest this time and this love and this passion into certain performers or directors or artists in general, and then you want them to succeed because then you feel a part of it. Like I helped them get there, right? Without the fans, it almost feels not like you own a piece of them. That's not what I'm trying to say, but
Yeah,
it's like
yeah, yeah.
you have like you an investment in them, and your investment in time and your support of them paid off for them, and that makes you feel good.
Mhm.
So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think I really enjoyed looking at a lot of these performances and seeing again some stuff that I had never seen her act like. For example, and Everything's for a Reason. That's something brand new. Like I've
Mhm.
never seen her do a performance like that. So I thought that was really interesting. What was your favorite performance out of what you watched?
I mean, it would have to be the Wonder Bra commercial because it's just so weird. Because she's walking around, she looks out of place, not but in a way that like they knew what they're doing, right? Because like, what is this character? What is her character supposed to be in that? She's
Yeah.
walking like she's walking down at like a library looking aisle of books and pulls something off a shelf and starts looking at like, what is this? It's hilarious.
It's weird and it's linked, so go check it out.
Yeah.
It's very bizarre. I think my favorite performance of her, I'd have to say the chick box in Underground,
Yeah.
Xerxes. I like that, just sort of the wild, zany sort of thing, and just she had so many different sort of reactions through
Mhm.
that. So it wasn't like she was playing one specific thing. She'll go from angry to like flirty to drugged out of her mind. You get the action in there. It was a good showcase for a bunch of different types of things that
Yeah.
character did. So I'm big on that. So again, just wrapping up here, we do have one for the death reel. And we're going to start seeing more and more deaths coming up
Yeah.
soon. So we're getting very close, ladies and gentlemen, to getting to like the Scream Queen phase. But we do
Yeah.
have one episode that I feel like we got to get out of the way before we get there.
Yeah, this one's going to be a delicate dance.
Yes, it is going to be a delicate dance. And the reason why the next episode that we're going to do is, I guess, we're just going to, for lack of a better term, the skin flick phase.
Yeah.
So she did a movie called Vinyl Dolls and a movie called Embrace the Darkness 3, and then Emmanuel's Intimate Encounters, which Rolf Konevsky directed some of those. And he's the guy that directed The Hazing and a bunch of other stuff with Tiffany Shepis in it as well. And hopefully we'll be able to get him on a show in the future and we watch all of his movies with her in them in one show. Trying to work on getting that all set up. Have you ever actually watched one of these kind of like Cinemax skin flicks from the beginning to the end?
Maybe as a young person, I don't know.
I don't think I ever have.
Because they have scripts, right? I mean, they have
Yeah.
1, 2, 3 acts and a beginning, middle, and an end, and all that. I mean, they're movies, they're real movies. So
Yeah. So I'm actually kind of interested just to watch like what the hell is Vinyl Dolls about?
Well, I've seen Vinyl Dolls. I've seen that
okay.
before.
Well, don't
Yeah.
spoil it for me because I don't
Okay.
know. And Embrace the Darkness 3, like what are these movies actually about? Maybe that'll be a case where we actually dive a little bit more into the plots of these movies to see what's going on. But the reason why I kind of wanted to just put all of this stuff together is because we're actually going to have our friend Rachel on as well.
Yeah,
and
that's wise.
And I want to have a discussion on sort of like nudity in horror films in general. I'm a film director. I've directed movies that have nudity in them. And I think we could have an actual interesting discourse on, what does it mean for a lot of these scream queens to get topless in these movies? And
Right.
why do filmmakers and horror fans kind of maybe expect that from scream queens? And when they don't get that, maybe there's a disappointment factor, or maybe they come to expect it after a certain time, right? It's like, well, this person got naked in this movie, so they better get naked in the next movie. How that interacts with the actors themselves, because they become typecast at that point.
Yeah.
Tiffany Shepis become, well, she got naked in this movie, so we can just cast her and we're going to get automatic nudity in the next movie. I think there's an actual good discussion to be had about that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just a couple dudes going, oh yeah, we watched a couple skin flicks sort of thing. So I'm kind of going to look into that, and then I don't want to address that in any future film. So when we do subsequent episodes,
good point.
When we do subsequent episodes, I'm not going to be there like, oh, and guess what? Tiffany Shepis got naked in this one, and that kind of stuff. That's not what we're about, and we don't want to. But I do think it's an important thing to talk about in terms of her overall career as a scream queen, because you can't avoid it, I don't think. So that's our plan. We're gonna have a sort of like a very respectful discussion on what it all means, and things of that nature. And I'll pose some questions to her. Maybe Ms. Shepis will reach out and provide some clarification on some of that stuff from her perspective as well. We'll see. But that'll come out probably after Christmas. Like I said, we do these about once a month. That's the plan. So if you want to hear about Vinyl Dolls and Embrace the Darkness 3.
Yeah, you're gonna want to hit that like and subscribe.
Yeah. Please
help that next episode.
Help our channel, everybody. Help our channel, right? So with that, don't forget, contact us at outpostunknown@gmail.com. If we missed anything or you have access to any of the films that we don't have, Jeff, you want to take us out?
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't run. Don't do the K. Stay out of the road. Look both ways before you cross the street.
For sure.
Just remember, whatever you do, don't do K.